realization experienced by the Tathagata in his inmost self, and, surrounded by the yakshas, conversing on the verbal teachings and stories of the Buddha. Those Buddha lands were seen with the leaders. There is surely a discrepancy here in the text. Tiang reads. In all the Buddha lands in the 10 quarters were also seen such events going on, and there was no difference whatever. Wei is quite different and has the following. Besides, he saw all the Buddha lands and all the kings thinking of the transitoriness of the body. As they are covetously attached to their thrones, wives, children, and relatives, they find themselves bound by the 5 passions and have no time for emancipation. Seeing this, they abandon their dominions, palaces, wives, concubines, elephants, horses, and precious treasures, giving them all up to the Buddha and his brotherhood. They now retreat into the mountain woods, leaving their homes and wishing to study the doctrine. Ravana then sees the bodhisattvas in the mountain woods strenuously applying themselves to the mastery of the truth, even to the extent of throwing themselves to the hungry tiger, lion, and rakshasas. He thus sees the bodhisattvas reading and reciting the sutras under a tree in the woods and discoursing on them for others, seeking thereby the truth of the Buddha. He then sees the bodhisattvas seated under the Bodhi tree in the Bodhi mandala thinking of the suffering beings and meditating on the truth of the Buddha. He then sees the Venerable Mahamedi the Bodhisattva before each Buddha preaching about the spiritual discipline of one's inner life. And also sees the Bodhisattva surrounded by all the yakshas and families and talking about names, words, phrases, and paragraphs. This last sentence is evidently the translation of the Sanskrit Dasanapathaikatham, which is contrasted in the Lankavatara throughout with Pratyatmaryajananagokara. The spiritual realm realized by noble wisdom in one's inmost consciousness. Then the Blessed One, beholding again this great assembly with his wisdom eye, which is not the human eye, laughed loudly and most vigorously like the Lion King. Emitting rays of light from the tuft of hair between the eyebrows, from the ribs, from the loins, from the Srivatsa on the breast, and from every pore of the skin. Emitting rays of light which shone flaming like the fire taking place at the end of a kalpa, like a luminous rainbow, like the rising sun, blazing brilliantly, gloriously. Which were observed from the sky by Sakra, Brahma, and the guardians of the world. The one who sat on the peak of Lanka vying with Mount Sumeru laughed the loudest laugh. At that time the assembly of the Bodhisattvas together with Sakra and Brahma, each thought within himself. For what reason, I wonder, from what cause does the Blessed One who is the master of all the world, after smiling first, laugh the loudest laugh? Why does he emit rays of light from his own body? Why, emitting rays of light, does he remain silent? With the realization of the truth in his inmost self, and absorbed deeply and showing no surprise in the bliss of samadhi, and reviewing the 10 quarters, looking around like the Lion King, and thinking only of the discipline, attainment, and performance of Ravana? At that time, Mahamedi the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, who was previously requested by Ravana to ask the Buddha concerning his self-realization, feeling pity on him, and knowing the minds and thoughts of the assembly of the Bodhisattvas, and observing that beings to be born in the future would be confused in their minds because of their delight in the verbal teaching, because of their clinging to the letter as fully in accordance with the spirit, because of their clinging to the disciplinary powers of the Sravakas, Pratyekabuddhas, and philosophers, which might lead them to think how it were that the Tathagatas, the Blessed Ones, even in their transcendental state of consciousness should burst out into loudest laughter. Mahamedi the Bodhisattva asked the Buddha in order to put a stop to their inquisitiveness the following question. For what reason, for what cause did this laughter take place? Said the Blessed One. Well done, Mahamedi. Well done, indeed, for once more, Mahamedi. Viewing the world as it is in itself and wishing to enlighten the people in the world who are fallen into a wrong view of things in the past, present, and future, thou undertakest to ask me the question. Thus should it be with the wise men who want to ask questions for both themselves and others. Ravana, Lord of Lanka, O Mahamedi, asked a twofold question of the Tathagatas of the past who are Arhats and perfect Buddhas. And he wishes now to ask me a twofold question in order to have its distinction, attainment, and scope ascertained. This is what is never tasted by those who practice the meditation of the Sravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers. And the same will be asked by the question-loving 10-headed one of the Buddhas to come. Knowing that, the Blessed One said to the Lord of Lanka, thus: Ask, thou Lord of Lanka. The Tathagata has given thee permission to ask, delay not, whatever questions thou desirest to have answered, I will answer each of them with judgment to the satisfaction of your heart. Keeping thy seat of thought free from false discrimination, observe well what is to be subdued at each stage. Ponder things with wisdom. Seeing into the nature of the inner principle in thyself, abide in the bliss of samadhi. Embraced by the Buddhas in samadhi, abide in the bliss of tranquilization. Going beyond the samadhi and understanding attained by the Sravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, abide in the attainment of the Bodhisattvas in the stages of Akala, Samadhi, and Dharmamagga. Grasp well the egolessness of all things in its true significance. Be anointed by the Buddhas in samadhi at the great palace of lotus jewels. Surrounded by the Bodhisattvas who are sitting on lotuses of various sorts, each supported by the gracious power of the Buddhas. Thou shalt find thyself sitting on a lotus and each one of the Bodhisattvas looking at thee face to face. This is a realm beyond the imagination. Thou shouldst plan out an adequate plan and establish thyself at a stage of discipline by planning out such a plan as shall include all kinds of skillful means, so that thou comest to realize that realm which is beyond imagination. And thou shouldst attain the stage of Tathagatahood in which one is able to manifest oneself in various forms, and which is something never seen before by the Sravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, philosophers, Brahma, Indra, Bhupendra, and others. The following sentence is done by the aid of Tiang, as the Sanskrit does not seem to give any sense. Literally translated it reads: Thereby the becoming lotuses, by those lotuses that are blessed variously by the benediction of his own person. Way has. O King of Lanka, thou wilt before long see thy person, too, thus sitting on the lotus throne and continuing to abide there in a most natural manner. There are innumerable families of lotus kings and innumerable families of bodhisattvas there, each one of whom is sitting on a lotus throne. And surrounded by those thou wilt find thyself and looking face to face at one another, and each one of them will before long come to abide in a realm beyond the understanding. At that moment the Lord of Lanka, being permitted by the Blessed One, rose from his seat on the peak of the jewel mountain which shone like the jewel lotus, immaculate and shining in splendor. He was surrounded by a large company of celestial maidens, and all kinds of garlands, flowers, perfumes, incense, unguents, umbrellas, banners, fias, necklaces, half-necklaces, diadems, tiaras, and other ornaments whose splendor and excellence were never heard of or seen before, were created. Music was played surpassing anything that could be had by the gods, Nagas, Yakshas, Rakshasas, Gandharvas, Kinnaras, Mahoragas, and men. Musical instruments were created equal to anything that could be had in all the world of desire, and also such superior musical instruments were created as were to be seen in the Buddha lands. The Blessed One and the Bodhisattvas were enveloped in a net of jewels. A variety of dresses and high banners was made rising high in the air as high as 7 tala trees to greet the Buddha, showering great clouds of offerings, playing music which resounded all around. And then descending from the air, the Lord of Lanka sat down on the peak of the jewel mountain ornamented with magnificent jewel lotus whose splendor was second only to the sun and lightning. Sitting he made courtesy, smiling first to the Blessed One for his permission, and proposed him a twofold question. It was asked of the Tathagatas of the past, who were Arhats, fully enlightened ones, and it was solved by them. Blessed One, now I ask of thee. The request will certainly be complied with by thee as far as verbal instruction is concerned, as it was by the Buddhas of the past. Blessed One, duality was discoursed upon by the transformed Tathagatas and Tathagatas of transformation, but not by the Tathagatas of silence. The Tathagatas of silence are absorbed in the blissful state of samadhi, they do not discriminate concerning this state, nor do they discourse on it. Blessed One, thou assuredly wilt discourse on this subject of duality. Thou art thyself a master of all things, an arhat, a tathagata. The sons of the Buddha and myself are anxious to listen to it. The Blessed One said, Lord of Lanka, tell me what you mean by duality? The Lord of the Rakshasas, who was renewed in his ornaments, full of splendor and beauty, with a diadem, bracelet, and necklace strung with vajra thread, said, it is said that even dharmas are to be abandoned, and how much more adharmas. Blessed One, why does this dualism exist that we are called upon to abandon? What are adharmas? And what are dharmas? How can there be a duality of things to abandon? A duality that arises from falling into discrimination. From discriminating self-substance where there is none, from the idea of things created and uncreated, because the non-differentiating nature of the alaya-vijnana is not recognized? Like the seeing of a hair circle as really existing in the air, the notion of dualism belongs to the realm of intellection not exhaustively purgated. This being the case as it should be, how could there be any abandonment of dharmas and adharmas? Said the Blessed One, Lord of Lanka, seest thou not that the differentiation of things, such as is perceived in jars and other breakable objects whose nature it is to perish in time, takes place in a realm of discrimination cherished by the ignorant? This being so, is it not to be so understood? It is due to discrimination cherished by the ignorant that there exists the differentiation of dharma and adharma. Noble wisdom, however, is not to be realized by seeing things this way. Lord of Lanka, let it be so with the ignorant who follow the particularised aspect of existence that there are such objects as jars, etc. But it is not so with the wise. One flame of uniform nature rises up depending on houses, mansions, parks, and terraces, and burns them down, while a difference in the flames is seen according to the power of each burning material which varies in length, magnitude, etc. This being so, why is it not to be so understood? The duality of dharma and adharma thus comes into existence. Not only is there seen a fire flame spreading out in one continuity and yet showing a variety of flames, but from one seed, Lord of Lanka, are produced, also in one continuity, stems, shoots, knots, leaves, petals, flowers, fruit, branches, all individualized. As it is with every external object from which grows a variety of objects, so also with internal objects. From ignorance there develop the skandhas, tadas, ayatanas, with all kinds of objects accompanying, which grow out in the triple world where we have, as we see, happiness, form, speech, and behavior, each differentiating infinitely. The oneness of the Vijnana is grasped variously according to the evolution of an objective world. Thus there are seen things inferior, superior, and middling, things defiled and free from defilement, things good and bad. Not only, Lord of Lanka, is there such a difference of conditions in things generally. There is also seen a variety of realizations attained innerly by each yogin as he treads the path of discipline which constitutes his practice. How much more difference in dharma and adharma do we not see in a world of particulars which is evolved by discrimination? Indeed, we do. Lord of Lanka, the differentiation of dharma and adharma comes from discrimination. Lord of Lanka, what are dharmas? That is, they are discriminated by the discriminations cherished by the philosophers, Sravakas, Pratyekabuddhas, and ignorant people. They think that the dharmas headed by quality and substance are produced by causes. These are the notions to be abandoned. Such are not to be regarded as real because they are appearances. It comes from one's clinging to appearances that the manifestations of his own mind are regarded as reality. Such things as jars, etc., are products of discrimination conceived by the ignorant, they exist not. Their substances are not attainable. The viewing of things from this viewpoint is known as their abandonment. What, then, are adharmas? Lord of Lanka, dharmas are unattainable as to their selfhood, they are not appearances born of discrimination, they are above causality. There is in them no such dualistic happening as is seen as reality and non-reality. This is known as the abandoning of dharmas. What again is meant by the unattainability of dharmas? That is, it is like horns of a hare, or an ass, or a camel, or a horse, or a child conceived by a barren woman. They are dharmas, the nature of which is unattainable. They are not to be thought as real because they are appearances. They are only talked about in popular parlance if they have any sense at all. They are not to be adhered to as in the case of jars, etc. As these unrealities are to be abandoned as not comprehensible by the mind, so are things of discrimination also to be abandoned. This is called the abandoning of dharmas and adharmas. Lord of Lanka, your question as to the way of abandoning dharmas and adharmas is hereby answered. Lord of Lanka, thou sayest again that thou hast asked this question of the Tathagatas of the past who were arhats and fully enlightened ones, and that it was solved by them. Lord of Lanka, that which is spoken of as the past belongs to discrimination. As the past is thus a discriminated idea, even so are the ideas of the future and the present. Because of reality the Tathagatas do not discriminate. They go beyond discrimination and futile reasoning. They do not follow the individuation aspect of forms except when reality is disclosed for the edification of the unknowing and for the sake of their happiness. It is by transcendental wisdom that the Tathagata performs deeds transcending forms. Therefore, what constitutes the Tathagatas in essence as well as in body is wisdom. They do not discriminate, nor are they discriminated. Wherefore do they not discriminate the manas? Because discrimination is of the self, of soul, of personality. How do they not discriminate? The manovijnana is meant for the objective world where causality prevails as regards forms, appearances, conditions, and figures. Therefore, discrimination and non-discrimination must be transcended. Way. Lord of Lanka, what you speak of as past is a form of discrimination, and so are the future and the present, also of discrimination. Lord of Lanka, when I speak of the real nature of suchness as being real, it also belongs to discrimination. It is like discriminating forms as the ultimate limit. If one wishes to realize the bliss of real wisdom, let him discipline himself in the knowledge that transcends forms. Therefore, do not discriminate the Tathagatas as having knowledge body or wisdom essence. Do not cherish any discrimination in thy mind. Do not cling in thy will to such notions as ego, personality, soul, etc. How not to discriminate? It is in the manovijnana that various conditions are cherished such as forms, figures, etc. Do not cherish such discriminations. Do not discriminate nor be discriminated. Further, Lord of Lanka, it is like various forms painted on the wall, all sentient beings are such. Lord of Lanka, all sentient beings are like grasses and trees, with them there are no acts, no deeds. Lord of Lanka, all dharmas and adharmas, of them nothing is heard, nothing talked. Tiang. Lord of Lanka, what you speak of as past is no more than discrimination, so is the future. I too am like him. Is this to be read? The present, too, is like it. Lord of Lanka, the teaching of all the Buddhas is outside discrimination. As it goes beyond all discriminations and futile reasonings, it is not a form of particularization, it is realized only by wisdom. That this absolute teaching is at all discoursed about is for the sake of giving bliss to all sentient beings. The discoursing is done by the wisdom transcending forms. It is called the Tathagata. Therefore, the Tathagata has his essence, his body in this wisdom. He thus does not discriminate, nor is he to be discriminated. Do not discriminate him after the notion of ego, personality, or being. Why this impossibility of discrimination? Because the manovijnana is aroused on account of an objective world wherein it attaches itself to forms and figures. Therefore, the Tathagata is outside the discriminating view as well as the discriminated idea. Lord of Lanka, it is like beings painted in colors on a wall, they have no sensibility or intelligence. Sentient beings in the world are also like them. No acts, no rewards are with them. So are all the teachings, no hearing, no preaching. Lord of Lanka, beings are appearances, they are like figures painted on the wall, they have no sensibility or consciousness. Lord of Lanka, all that is in the world is devoid of work and action because all things have no reality, and there is nothing heard, nothing hearing. Lord of Lanka, all that is in the world is like an image magically transformed. This is not comprehended by the philosophers and the ignorant. Lord of Lanka, he who thus sees things, is the one who sees truthfully. Those who see things otherwise walk in discrimination. As they depend on discrimination, they cling to dualism. It is like seeing one's own image reflected in a mirror, or one's own shadow in the water, or in the moonlight, or seeing one's shadow in the house, or hearing an echo in the valley. People grasping their own shadows of discrimination uphold the discrimination of dharma and adharma and, failing to carry out the abandonment of the dualism, they go on discriminating and never attain tranquility. By tranquility is meant oneness. And oneness gives birth to the highest samadhi, which is gained by entering into the womb of Tathagatahood, which is the realm of noble wisdom realized in one's inmost self. The first chapter called Ravana asking for instruction. It is noteworthy that the chapter endings are not the same throughout the entire text. Generally, reference is made to the sutra itself at the end of a chapter, stating that the chapter bears such a title belonging to such a sutra. But in the present case there is no mention at all of the Lankavatara Sutra, as if this Ravana section were something quite independent. While there is no doubt about its being a later addition. Seeing what a complete piece of narrative it forms by itself. And again seeing that the rest of the text makes no further reference to Ravana. The trend of the discourse as presented by the Buddha shows that it is closely related to the sutra. Especially when it emphasizes at the end the importance of self-realization against the inanity or futility of the verbal teaching ordinarily given out by a master.